Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are back with our monthly Talk to Me Tuesdays. This month, our topic is the rewards from an employee perspective and what rewards management really looks like, unlocking that perspective and giving the opportunity for you guys to give us your interpretation of what the rewards management system looks like for you now and what you would like for it to look like here in the future. Joining me as always is Chantrice, CEO and founder of Think Sharp LLC. Thanks, Chantrice, for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. Welcome in.
We would like and love to know where you guys are chiming in from in the chat or the comments. Please drop, your city, your location, in the industry that you work in. It'll give us some more context as we move throughout our discussion today. We definitely want to talk about the critical topic, like I said, of employee rewards and the perspective surrounding it. Most employers don't typically apply the effort to get the true understanding of how the employee feels about what their rewards management system may be. So, as we dive through our topics, we have some poll questions that we would like you guys to participate in. With our first topic, the evolution of the rewards and engagement program. So, take a look at the poll question we have on the screen for you. All you have to do is drop 1, 2, or 3 for your answer. Have you noticed a shift in your own perspective on rewards and engagement over the years? We can go back from when you first started into your career or the workforce and where you are now, and has your perspective changed any? We'll give everybody about 30 seconds to drop their answers, and then we'll dive into the perspectives that we think. Okay, so on average, we are looking at, yes, people's perspectives have changed over the years, which is, expected. Where you were when you were 16 and you came into the workforce to where you are now as a young adult or an adult that is a little more seasoned in your career, we wouldn't expect your perspective on this topic to be the same. So, from overall, I think, thinking about how companies have to adapt and transition traditional rewards programs, when baby boomers were in the workforce or starting out, you really looked for companies that offered pension plans. What was the 401k look like? How is retirement? What is the longevity? How long do I have to be here in order to retire? We know that was the thing, but nowadays you don't see a lot of companies even offering a pension option. Chantrice, chime in. Let me know your thoughts on how you have seen where it started and where you think it is now, as far as from an employee perspective.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what you were saying, those things were so attractive back then to workers just entering into the industry. And honestly, I think healthcare played a major factor too. Like, what are your healthcare benefits? Because that was like the top priority of our list. Not to say it's not now,
Right.
but things have shifted. Now we want a little bit more flexibility in our time. I do pay homage to COVID, but I feel like there was some aspects still there even before that even happened. There were several companies that were offering remote opportunities and being more flexible in their environments. I call them being ahead of the curve.
Right.
So when COVID happened, it was like all these other employers got on board. Like, okay, so obviously we need to do some deep thinking. We need to figure out what isn't working and what is working and what we can do to actually alter some of these incentives and benefits, because employees aren't looking for those same things that we were offering before. So yeah,
I
yeah, I just have to pivot.
I mean, I definitely think, salary, benefits, health insurance, what that longevity look like. Not to say that they aren't still,
Right.
priorities, but where do they fall on the list? And I love the part that you said there were companies that were already diving into hybrid work, who
Yeah.
were ahead of the curve when it came to, as technology was transitioning and increasing, they were applying those things internally, and were already set when COVID hit, versus companies scrambling to figure out different software and platforms to utilize to, implement what we needed at that time.
Absolutely.
I do think now, as most people's thought processes have changed, for myself, I know flexibility is at the top of that list. I'm looking for work-life balance. I'm looking for, the development of myself in my career if I'm looking to be here for, an extended period of time versus here, do your work and that's it. Are you trying to grow me? Or, personally, I have my own thoughts of how I want to, progress in my career, but does
Exactly.
my employer, feel the same way? And is that something that is included in how they, engage with us? So with our next poll question, well, not even the poll question. Before we dive into that, we kind of want to just dive into what matters to the employee, like we were saying. Does flexibility matter to you? How do you guys feel about that? How do you feel with the great compromise now, going to where employers want you back in the office, versus being comfortable with the flexibility of hybrid or complete remote work? What do you think, Chantrice?
I think it's a good idea that employers are heading in a direction, at least having these conversations internally.
Hmm.
Because me as an employee who has worked for, major organizations in the past, maybe I felt that my voice wasn't heard. Some things that I actually wanted wasn't heard, and they were just kind of given this standard across the board because they felt like that's what everybody wanted. But with these changes in place now, and with, like you said, the great compromise, it's like, okay, if you want happy employees at the end of the day, you do need to listen to what they have to say. And, if the majority of your population can work remotely, I get every organization can't do that. But
Hmm.
if they're looking to, if they were already performing their work remotely and the majority of them would like that, at least that option, I
Right.
think it's worth the conversation. Again, it's not going to be the same across the board, and not everyone can do that. But it's in the employer's best interest to listen to what their employees at least want, because at the end of the day, they're the ones working for you. They're the
Right.
ones growing your business. They're the ones,
Agreed.
yeah. So I think it's worth a conversation
It
at
is.
the
And
very minimum.
I think a lot of employers struggle with how they gather that feedback, whether it's doing surveys, if you're putting that with your managers to have smaller conversations in different departments. But it's very important for employers to figure out, how can I gather the information from my employees and see how they feel. If you don't know how they feel, you don't know how to build these
That's
programs
true.
or these reward and engagement incentives or initiatives. If it's coming from you, it may be a personal perspective. You may have a baby boomer or a very traditional person that thinks, buying lunch once a week is enough, where some people could care less if you're buying me lunch. I'm looking for something else, but you haven't asked me, so you're not sure. I think organizations have to do better with figuring out what method to use to gather this feedback. And it just starts with being open and transparent and having a conversation
Absolutely.
with your staff.
Yep.
So I definitely agree with you. Jumping into beyond monetary rewards. Chantrice, I'll let you drive this one, but could we drop the poll question and see, how does the audience feel about rewards outside of the monetary range?
Are we giving them a little time to answer the question?
Yeah, I was trying to.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? What does that look like? We know everyone wants a monetary. Who doesn't want to increase? But raises typically come once a year. So, if that is the only thing that drives you, what is going to keep your staff motivated throughout the year? Let's see. And I know it may be um a delay, so we can keep going. We'll give them
Okay.
opportunity, once we
Well,
get this in.
just to kind of go based off of what we've been saying already, I think it's, different organizations is going to be different for everybody, whether it's monetary rewards. There's just a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure where that's coming from. So forgive me if you can't hear me, but outside of monetary rewards, you have to look at the full package of the benefits that the employer is offering you, whether it's professional development, can you learn and grow in your role there? What do you see yourself doing outside of the position that you were hired for? Like, do they offer those sorts of rewards, or at least professional development, if that's what you want? Then you can go into, like you said, flexible scheduling. Do you have the opportunity to work hybrid? Do you have, other options outside of me just clocking in 9 to 5, being stuck in an office? doing the exact same work I can do from home. So there's going to have to be some flexibility in there if that's what you're looking for. I mean, obviously, that's not what everybody wants, but it's really digging deep and seeing what it is that an employer can offer you or what you're looking for in your next position that will, I don't know, just help you make some decisions about where you would like to go next, or even in your current role, and having those conversations with your manager, just providing those feedback like, hey, I've been seeing this trending, how does our top upper level management executives feel about, these ideas? Don't be afraid to be open. Because at the end of the day, that's how you get feedback as well. Like, no, that's actually not going to fit for our environment. Or yes, let's continue to have more conversations about it. And maybe something that we can implement in the future.
I agree. I definitely think there are ways to reward your staff outside of just wage increases. I mean, wage increases on the annual when the 360 is done is one thing. Depending on the industry, you may be in a situation where commissions or bonuses can happen on a quarterly basis or something like that, still monetary. But then when you come off of that, I think for me, it dives right back into my flexibility, my time away from the office.
Yeah.
So my PTO, if we're not going to, no one's giving out a raise once a month or every quarter. So how can we have incentives where, depending upon my performance or how efficient that I am being on particular projects or particular jobs, PTO can be, added to that.
Absolutely. That's a really good one.
A departmental thing. Okay, the sales department has increased sales this quarter by 50%. Everybody in that department is granted additional PTO. I definitely think that is another way. Yes, it does equate monetary for a business on the back end, because the company is still having to
Right.
pay for that time away. But if the employee is performing the way that you need them to, that means your bottom line for the business is increasing. Then it should be something that you can work into your budget, or including hybrid days. Hey, you get another paid day off, or you can work from home this day. Things like that, I think, are other ways that you can reward your staff. I mean, I like a free lunch, Chick-fil-A, biscuits in the morning.
Who doesn't?
I definitely good for me. But I also like to be able to work maybe a 10 to 3 a particular Friday, or
Yeah.
get off early at 12 or something like that, so that I still feel like I have my time away versus, Monday through Friday is still a hard pill to swallow nowadays.
Yeah,
I
it
think
is.
that's another thing that employers could think about outside of a monetary way to incentivize their staff.
I
So
can agree there.
I definitely think for that. Well, let's drop the next poll question when we're focusing on a positive work environment. I think that is definitely something that is not necessarily quantitative when it comes to days of PTO or days
Mhm.
at home when it's a hybrid situation, but it is definitely something that has changed on the priority list of things that are important to employees when they're choosing their employer or where they are currently. We know work culture is a big thing. And as times are changing and more things are being taken into consideration with work life balance, mental health, culture in the workplace is really showing up to the forefront.
Yep.
And the bad ones are really being brought to the forefront, and it is something that companies and employers and HR departments are really having to work through. So let's dive into that. Could we put the poll question up for the it's the next poll question about the positive work environment? Let's get a chance to get that one up. Here we go. So, how does your organization actively promote a positive work environment? Are they emphasizing on the diversity and inclusion incentives? Are they encouraging open and transparent communication? Are they providing you with mental health and support resources? And if you are with a company that has, done really well in this area and they're doing something outside of these three, drop it. Let us know what those
Yes,
are. We
please.
love to hear. But Jantrice, I'll let you dive in on this one while we're waiting on the comments to come through.
I think with this topic, most employers struggle with getting the actual feedback. Like, how do you get the feedback from your actual employees? And there's so many different methods that you can take. You can do pulse surveys. You can do, of course, the annual performance review is normally going over performance, but it's also a great time to have that one-on-one conversation with your manager to kind of express some of the things that you've been dealing with in your position, whether positive or negative. So the only way we know how to fix it, coming from the employer perspective, the only way we know how to fix these issues is if you let us know. So
Right.
I know a lot of times it's uncomfortable having those conversations. Maybe you even don't want to say it. Personally, there's other ways. So, there's sometimes a feedback box or somewhere, within your organization where you can drop a note in and, it can be completely anonymous, or like I said, going back to the poll surveys and the other different ways to obtain that feedback from your employees. So that way, they still feel comfortable expressing
Mhm.
themselves, but they're not necessarily putting their name on it. So the only way to fix a negative environment is to share that feedback so it can,
Right.
make it into a positive environment.
And like you said, you have to be aware if the employer is not
Yeah,
putting forth the effort to have that open and transparent communication and encourage it. Depending on how toxic an environment can be, an employee may not feel comfortable. They may feel like some level of retaliation may come in
exactly.
play or something along those manners, because depending on how, management is, there's so many different layers with this one. But I have seen some companies that actively are checking in. It may be a one-on-one, it may be a departmental. I know one of my favorite things when I was with my previous company and we had a larger staff was feedback Fridays. Not necessarily a complete open forum where we're,
Just
tagging,
throwing everything at you.
but each department had the opportunity to give us some feedback. So it was your opportunity to say, hey, this week we had a little struggle with communication from the finance
Awesome.
department. I understand one person was out on vacation, so maybe that's what led to the delays or things of that nature. But a positive and safe environment to express some of the things that you may have been struggling with throughout the week. So things don't build up and then someone's in their feelings, it's the end of the month, or now someone's sitting in HR for the last 6 months. So and so has been not doing this, which is holding
Yep.
from that. It kind of breaks that up so that people can get things off their chest in a positive and professional environment, and allow management, who is there to observe because they're having the conversations amongst themselves, and then management is there to, okay, I see. And then if this is something I see consistently happening out of this department, let me talk to that department head. Hey, we may need to work on the communication coming out of this department, especially when it's in relation to this. And it gives no one feels singled out. No one
Yep.
feels like, oh, where did this come from? I didn't know I haven't been performing in this manner, because we're actively talking about it, whether
That's
it's
right.
weekly or bi-weekly. It gives that open forum. Um, but sometimes, communication is not a learned trait. It's not because it is a learned trait. You
It
have to
is a learned trait.
learn how to really communicate effectively in the different environments, and then understanding the audience, because sometimes people, even though a open forum may be presented, they still may not be comfortable. So it could
Exactly.
be, hey, we have feedback Friday, Wednesdays. If you don't want to necessarily speak up, drop those things on, whatever the inner office communications is. Or like you said, if there's a anonymous way that they can provide that information, and then it can still be read out loud by, the manager in the room or something along that nature, so that someone still can be heard, although they may not be comfortable, in the setting of
Speaking out in a group setting.
right.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And one thing about getting all this feedback, I know we've been throwing that out a lot, but employers definitely need to make sure they're being intentional with that feedback as well when they're obtaining all this information. And which is great if you're to the point where you're like, okay, we need to figure out what's going on. Morale is low. There's some other issues that we need to work on. Let's survey our employees. Just be ready to have an action plan, because it's one thing to survey an employee, they give you their honest feedback and you do nothing, you drop the ball. So you want to make sure you have an action plan, whether that's, an open communication to say that you are working actively on that plan, to say, I realize we have issues with, XYZ. This is the steps that we're going to take to try to address them. Just want to make sure, we're communicating with you. We're letting you know that we are listening to you, and that we will have a resolution or come to some sort of agreement at the end. So there has to be some sort of action behind that survey. It can't just be, okay, well, we know how y'all feel, and you
No,
know,
you
get
hit
over it.
you hit the nail on the head with that one. I think that's one of the quickest ways to drop morale very, immediately. If you go
Yeah,
the process of telling them we have transparency, we have this open door, come in here, speak your mind, let us know what's going on, and then they see no action. You have to be very intentional, like you said, with hard deadlines. I'm hearing you, and I even if you as an employer cannot meet them with what their need is. I mean, if you have someone saying, I think everyone should have new laptops because what we have going on right now isn't working, that may not necessarily be in the budget for that particular quarter.
right.
But even if I'm unable to meet what the expectation has been presented or the complaint or concern, I need to communicate that to you as well. We
Absolutely.
heard you. We're going to put this on our long-term list to see what we can do to accommodate this situation. But right now I just want to let you know you've been heard. We're making note, but we won't be able to put this into action immediately. And then the things that you can address, that you can fix, that are not going to be a budgetary expense, then
Low hanging fruit.
right. Address them quickly. You don't want your staff to feel like I said this 3 weeks ago. You want to have a talk feedback Friday every Friday. I'm repeating myself, and you
Exactly.
don't want them to
We're
feel that.
getting nowhere.
Then they'll stop participating, and then
Yeah.
now you don't know what's taking place, and what they're really feeling about the culture and the organization. But I definitely think for me, not being in a toxic work environment has moved very high on the priority list. It might be right
Absolutely.
under flexibility. And I know we had like an offline conversation about this when it comes to the priority list of what matters again. And I know wage and salary always makes its way there. However, I feel like that is something that, I mean, I'm not here if we haven't at least negotiated where I want to be,
Exactly where you want to be.
where I internally have a plan. Okay, after 6 months, I should be able to accomplish these things to leverage myself to have that conversation about compensation again. But what are we doing in the interim? What other
Yeah.
things does this company offer that will keep me happy to be here? We spend so much time working, more time at work than in our personal lives. So having those conversations, feeling comfortable, and then knowing that you're being heard, I think definitely helps improve what the work environment looks like.
Absolutely.
Um, our next topic is the impact of career development. We had a phase where this was happening a lot, and then a phase where it hasn't been happening at all.
Yeah.
So we want to ask you guys, how does your organization provide opportunities for employee career development? Is it formal mentorship programs, learning and development incentives, opportunities for promotions or internal mobility? And if there are other things that your company is doing, please feel free to drop those in the comments for us as well. Chantrice, what do you think about this one, and what have you experienced in the past, and what have you seen transition or trend up here lately?
So in the past, I think just like you said, employers were much more invested in this. I don't know how we got off the rails with employee career development. I think maybe there was a shift to just compensation and making sure we were in line with,
Yeah,
we were competitive with other companies and making sure we were paying, what we needed to pay in order to keep this or get this employee. And then employee career development kind of fell to the sidelines. But I'm all about personal growth. And I think maybe we've seen a decline in organizations now because employees are seeking their own ways of getting their own career development, whether that's from taking offline classes or just YouTube. I mean, YouTube University, I'm all about it. But, they're finding other ways to get this information or get, that extra step in their career
hmm
outside of their organization. They're taking the initiative to do it on their own.
right,
So I would like definitely to see that play back into organizations and where they are actually feeding into their employees versus have you see it all the time. They have all these open positions that they're hiring for. They're trying to get new people in. But what about your current population? Is there someone there that is doing exceptionally well that maybe, or not even that great because they may be bored in their role, that
right,
maybe you can kind of, sit with and have conversations with, and maybe there's a way to actually, you know, develop and train them into that new role that you're recruiting for. That'll save you time, that'll save you compensation, so many other resources, because now you're investing in your current population versus looking for other people to come in that you have to train up from the ground up anyway.
Anyway, I absolutely agree. I think the shift took place where companies, like you said, compensation and making sure you were competitive started off as companies wanted to be there because they were losing people or people were being purged from them because they were going somewhere else where the pay was better. And then I also feel like companies went the direction of I'm going to find and narrow down this particular person that is skilled already in this position, and I don't have to spend the money on developing them. I'm going to hire the person that already has the experience, not dealing with people coming into the workforce. I want someone that knows, can hit the ground running, because I'm thinking about my bottom line and what is going to be most effective. Maybe I don't have the staff to complete the training necessary to get the person to the level that we want them to be. But really, I really think it comes back down to skilled laborers, and I want someone that is a specialist in this position. And that is how we kind of transitioned out of some companies providing that additional career support. Now, you do have some companies that it is part of their mission and their goal and their vision with their staff to continuously develop them. Those are your companies that continue to hire within, promote within, and then those employees tend to have the longevity. They stay there longer. They know, hey, I just need to gain additional hours or, OJT in this particular field or this area, and then I will qualify for this because the company has been very good at defining how to grow with them. A lot of companies, they give you what they give you during the interview or the orientation process about, yes, we love to promote within, blah, blah, blah. But then when you get inside of the company, it's like, where can I find the information about how I grow? Yeah. No one seems to have that document. No one seems to know where that information is. And it's like, I know that that's Susie's position, but if Susie isn't growing, I can never get there, especially if you're at a smaller business. Now, when you work for a larger corporation, I think the opportunity to be promoted and to grow within is probably increased, and there's a higher percentage of that. But when you're somewhere small, it's almost like maybe this is just a stepping space for me to get some experience, and then I can take that to another company or another organization, because we know a lot of people will not bring you on if you don't have experience. Especially, that's something we've experienced in the HR industry. It's so hard to break into it if you have not had any experience. You have all the education that backs you, but without experience, companies won't bring you on because they don't want to have to spend so much time and money training. I see we have a couple of comments and responses to the questions in regards to we had 2, 3, and 1 when it comes to what their offices and organizations offer, which is really good. I mean, having a company that cares about your growth and your development speaks volumes, and that transitions back into a positive work environment, knowing where I am, where I stand, and how I can grow over my short-term goals or the next 2 to 3 years, knowing that and not having the blank face, like, what am I doing? Do I need to be looking for another job because I can't get to the dollar amount I want to be, or I'm not going to reach the continuous education that I'm looking or I desire because my company doesn't offer that. That's a big thing that I think will eventually swing back into once we get through the more trending topics, which is right now just the flexibility. I think that is the flexibility for sure. I know we kind of jumped over a little bit with, understanding what matters. And as we've gone through the last few talking points, I want to dive back onto that, and kind of go back to, how people prioritize what matters to them now. If your company was to send you a survey out, or if you were to be asked by your coworkers or colleagues of what is your list of priorities, 1 to 5, when it comes to employee rewards and things you're looking for out of the culture, and that experience, what would that look like for you, Shantri?
So what would my list of priorities be?
Yeah.
I would, well, I'm all for remote work. That's why I left my
Absolutely.
previous role because it was it wasn't offering remote, and I just couldn't understand for the life of me why during the pandemic I was working remotely, and then all of a sudden when things started opening back up, not now I have to go back into the office. I just couldn't understand that. And even though we had several conversations about it, they were like, "Well, you're just not in the type of environment that can support remote work." And I was like, you know what? And I just didn't feel like I was heard. It was kind of like a no. It was just a no.
Right. A
That's
hard
it. In the conversation. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just start looking for other opportunities. I was with this company for 9 years, and I had really, grown to love my position,
yeah.
everyone I was working with, obviously, but my priorities had changed. And, there's nothing wrong with that. If you are in a position where you outgrow it, or, you feel like you need to move on, that's okay. That's on you to make that decision. But of course, you want to weigh, the pros and cons, which I did. And I just felt like this was just such a big one for me. And I felt like eventually more employers will go in the same direction because, I mean, that's just what pretty much everyone is looking for. I would
Right.
say the majority. I'm not going to say everyone. But they're looking for more flexibility. People want their time back. They're not wanting to spend 8, 9 hours inside of an office when they can do that same work from their house, from the beach, like we were talking about, some from
Yeah.
anywhere in the world. There's just no reason, as long as the work is getting done. I don't think any employer should be tying someone down to a specific location just so you can be monitored, basically, to say you have, a butt in a seat,
And I think
basically.
that to dive on that one, I think that's the biggest thing. Before COVID and before hybrid work became a thing, everything was the clock, 8 to 5. Are you on time?
Yeah.
And that was being measured and monitored more than I think the actual work being completed, the
Oh,
tasks
absolutely.
themselves. Where I have the thought process that give me my assignments, what are my tasks, let me complete them. It may be 11 o'clock at night when I open up my laptop to get some stuff done. And if
Yeah,
my Wednesday work is, finished before noon, why should I still have to sit in here for another 4 or 5 hours? Then you run
absolutely.
into, from an HR perspective, employee relation issues. Oh, I have a manager coming in here telling me their employee is watching movies, they're on Netflix, they're in their phone. Well, if have they completed their tasks? Their tasks are completed, they should be able to leave and still be
Yeah,
compensated for their entire day versus,
yeah,
oh, you're done, go home. Nobody's going to clock out early and leave and not get paid for the day. But that is
yeah.
what has been monitored and measured for years versus task based employment, task based positions. I mean, now some industries, yes, you have to be there in order to
Right, right.
complete your jobs. And if that's the industry that you're in, that it comes with that. But if you're not in that type of field or profession, the opportunity to be remote, to have a flex schedule. I mean, I know for some, COVID was a hard thing, being isolated, being home, and not having that in person
That's
communication
true too.
and things like that. So I think the option should be presented. I don't have to be at home every day, but I would prefer to be at home more days than not. But I mean, for me, I'm okay. This works for me. I see your face, you see my face, we can still laugh and joke, and I don't have to do water cooler break room talk and
Conversations.
but for some, that is something that they like and that they enjoy and that they look forward to. And I
That's
think
true.
the opportunity should still be presented in some sort. I mean, I know like your larger like cable companies here in Atlanta, they had multiple buildings and they kind of sold or ended those leases, made everyone remote, and then now you're forced to only be 100% remote.
Yeah,
Companies can offer meetups, things like that. When I went to render ATL not too long ago, I met with someone from Zillow, and they were telling me how their staff is pretty much 100% remote, which makes sense since everything with them is online.
that's
But they
true.
have these group meetups in different cities
I think that's
so
brilliant.
that people have the opportunity to step away from the screen. You can come
Yeah,
work in office if you like the hybrid workplaces, like the Regis and the Spaces. They give them those opportunities in departments and in groups so that you still get the in person experience. And
and it's a choice.
I think that that's if flexibility is very high on your staff's list, you don't have to just say we're remote or not, hybrid or not. You can work through and dive into those a little bit more and see what you can offer that meets in the middle for, the companies that want people back in the office, and then for those that are very okay, with you being remote or being a lot more flexible. My number one is flexibility as well. I think my number two would definitely be the positive work environment. Um,
Yeah.
being able to, which dives into the wellness and work life balance, being able to manage the stress levels. If you are in a high impact, high stress job, having the opportunity to be able to step away and step back and things still flow without. I mean, you can't say, yeah, you need a wellness day, take it. Then when I come back the next day, I have 100 emails. My
Yeah.
stress levels are right back where they were the day
Yep.
before I took the wellness day. Um, being able to have something implemented to where someone that is in a high priority position or in a high stress level position can take a wellness day for real and come back to something that is still on track. There's not a lot of things that they have to hurry up and catch up on, or they have the appropriate, staff. They may or may not be consistent, but the department itself can carry the weight in those people's absences versus it all falls on you. Nothing can be done unless you're doing it. What would be your number two?
My number two, besides flexibility, I would say that's a hard one because I want to say compensation, but just like you said, I know that that was already, worked out normally before you even accept the position. I still think that's a very high priority.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah, readdress compensation
yes,
throughout the year.
but I would have to say professional development. Is there an opportunity for me to learn something new? Do you support that within your organization? And then do you also support me doing my own thing outside of your organization? A lot of people are working on growing their own personal brand. They have businesses, they have side hustles, they have other things they're doing outside of work. A lot of employers have issues with that because they feel like, there may be a conflict of interest. You have to go through the do your due diligence and make sure it's not part of their policy to where you can't work for a certain organization or do certain things that, where you're directly impacting your job. So I feel like an employer that is open to those types of things, open to me having my own business, open to me having a side hustle, open to professional development, and you have that within your organization, I think is very important. That would be my
I
number two.
agree. I agree. I love that one. Especially like just having that support for your growth. Because for myself, this may not be your forever space. So I
Right.
want to grow you, develop you, so that when you leave here and you move on to whatever your next, venture is, you came from a space where you're prepared.
That's right.
Every environment is different, and you may be somewhere that is very cozy and slow paced, and then you go somewhere else and it's like, why do I feel like I'm not prepared for this? But
Yep.
you didn't receive that professional development, or if it wasn't encouraged, or because again, some people, they don't want you to leave, so I'm not giving you any additional tools that will help you somewhere else. But I
The
mean,
wrong
that
mindset.
gatekeeping
Hmm.
ultimately impacts morale, it impacts your staff, and they'll still leave and look for something anyway. So I
Yeah.
love that. I love that as your number two for sure. That's probably a strong number three for me. Especially like I said, with the support portion, because
Yeah.
can't employers have a very hard time swallowing the pill that this may not be there forever. This may be
Right.
career and where you want to be until you retire, but this may not be that for me. And
That's
I
right.
should still have the opportunity to grow in my role or in my position and feel comfortable about that versus, oh, I bought a book and let me close it real quick because I want so and so to see the cover, or
Exactly.
training class during my break or something like that, because they're going to automatically assume I'm trying to leave. Now they're trying to replace me. I see my job posted on the
We
website.
see it all the time in HR. I'm telling you,
Right.
it happens. It happens.
Management will get in their head so quickly, and it's like, hey, post that job because I think Susie's gonna give us her notice soon. Did
Yep.
she tell you that? I mean, yes,
No.
you can read between the lines when someone's unhappy, but let's have a conversation. It may not always be what the perception from management is,
Exactly.
and that's what we're here for today anyway. So as we're getting ready to close out, we would love to get your number 1, 2, and 3 as far as what's on your priority list when it comes to employee rewards and the engagement that you're looking for from your organizations and your companies. We appreciate everyone for joining us. We're going to open up the comments and chats to get those answers and any other questions that you guys may have surrounding the other topics and talking points that we had today. We would love to hear them. We'll read them and we'll dive into them as we have about 5 minutes left. Let's see what we get. I hope that we can get someone to give us what their top 2 or 3 are, so that we can really see. I want to see where that work culture, comes in.
Yeah, me too. I'm interested to
It's
see.
been high on my list here the last year or two,
Yeah.
but um,
Everybody's different. We know that flexibility isn't at the top of everybody's priority list, but it'll be
right.
interesting to see what other people think and what's important to them.
Yeah. I know we had someone just going back through the comments looking at social engagement activities amongst employees and executives. I think that that is a really good one to be on your list, whether it's, in your top 3 or if it makes your top
That's a good
five,
one.
because you have some companies where management and executives are so separate from their staff.
Disconnected.
Is the disconnect, which leads into why they don't understand how their employees feel. But
Exactly.
being able to step outside of the office and see people in a different light, now still a professional light, we don't want to dive too far into what you do personally, but to see them relax just in a comfortable space, allows them to be able to feel like they can relate. I want to feel like I can relate to the people around me and not,
Yeah,
I don't know anything and this person is so distant. I like that one.
that's a
um
really good one.
I like that one. How were social activities for you when you were prior to COVID, when you were where you were?
Being in HR, I felt like I was the leader of all social activities. That's one of the many hats you wear in HR. So led a lot of those activities, and it boosts employee morale. All the things that we did, of course, it was highly appreciated by our employees. But I feel like it was still one of those things that were temporary. We were always looking for something that can really help engage everyone and bring everyone together, and we found that anything we did as a group that involved open communication from our executives when they just came in, I would talk to the executives before we had an event and say, hey, can you just speak about, some of the updates that are going on, maybe mention a couple things that are major that are going on in the organization, maybe some goals we're trying to reach. That'd be a perfect time for you to get your face out there to talk to everybody, because I know
Right.
you're busy and I know you don't get a chance to talk to everybody on a regular basis. And they seem to really like that. They're like, oh, okay, so this is what's going on. We're hearing from upper management. They're
Hmm.
talking to us like, just a normal water cooler conversation. And they really enjoyed that. And I felt like that did definitely boost employee morale overall. So
I
I
like
agree.
that one. I love the part when you say, having from the HR perspective, coaching, management, this is an opportunity to kind of give not a state of the union, message about the company,
Right. Just
but
something quick.
something quick, some good highlights to let them know like these are things we're working on and how it's going to continue to boost and grow our organization, which will they would understand the trickle down and how that will eventually help them. I think when you do those social engagements, having those quick little 5 minute, you know, talking points with upper management is definitely great. We have someone who dropped their 1, 2, and 3 for us: flexibility, professional development, I'm sorry, and caregiver support. I like that one. That
I
is
like that one
definitely
too.
something, depending on where you sit in the generational age groups in employment right now, you may be in a space where you are having to be a caregiver for an elderly parent or a child.
Yeah.
Depending on the situation. And I think companies are trying to do better now with this portion of what family medical leave looks like, what those
Yes.
accommodations look like. It is an area that definitely needs some more development for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's a harder pill for employers to swallow. as we are moving into a space where what happens in my personal life impacts my professional life as well,
Yeah.
and the employer having to take that into consideration. If I have a great employee, a great staff member, they're experiencing whatever the situation is at the moment, how can I support them so that they can still support us versus this won't work for us because you can't come in our,
Exactly.
and we'll
Exactly.
move in a different direction. I think, as more millennials are coming into more executive roles and moving higher up, as the baby boomers are coming out of the workforce, we may see a swing, in that area, caregiver support, maternity, paternity leave, what that really looks like. I hope to see that transition and that swing over the next 5 years or so. But right now, it's definitely a lot of work that needs to be
That
done in
needs to be
that
done.
area. Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then before we end, we have one more, financial growth, flexibility, and career educational growth. And I think those were our three. Uh,
Yep.
they were at the top of our list. So we 100% understand that, financial growth for sure. Even if, like you said, you discuss compensation upon accepting the position, but as you're in it, being able to leverage, your work ethic, what you've accomplished, and put yourself on a financial growth plan with the company, is something that should be done more often. I
Yeah.
should have to wait, 360 something days for you to review me. You don't remember what I did 6 months. We
No.
should have midpoint check-ins. There,
Yeah.
quarterly, I think is the best. Let's review what I've done this quarter, because if I'm not moving in the direction for financial growth, I want to address it now. I don't
Yeah.
want a year for you to be like,
Wait.
this wasn't your best year, Simone. You
Exactly.
tell me it wasn't my best month or my best quarter two. So quarter three, you would have saw the progression. You would have saw what
Yeah.
I'm capable of, and I would have had that opportunity, to show that. So I like that. I think that's something else that, HR departments can try to influence a little bit more,
Yeah.
with companies, more touch bases, more feedback on performance, versus where is it? Is it done? Let me see it, and just moving forward. So,
Yeah.
do you have anything else, Chantrice, you'd like to add today?
I do not. This has been a great
I
conversation. I
loved it. It
appreciate
was
everyone
good.
who has participated and dropped in the chats. I love that engagement, hence the name of our our conversation today.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And it's just always interesting to see what's going on in different organizations and how employees are feeling. And yeah, I'm all about it. I love it. So thank you for having me once again.
Absolutely.
This is
Yes,
good.
always. Thank you
Thank
guys
you,
for
guys.
joining us, and we will be back next month. Our topic for August is the great compromise, remote work or in office. So we hope to see you guys there. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye bye.